The city buzzed with the usual evening rush, headlights flashing, horns honking, and the distant hum of tires on wet pavement. It was another typical night in the heart of the city, where chaos was constant and life moved at a pace that never seemed to slow. Amidst the frenzy, there was one moment that stopped everything in its tracks. A car screeched to a halt at a traffic light, narrowly avoiding a collision. The driver, a woman, looked panicked, her face a mask of fear and pain. Her hands were clenched on her stomach, and sweat trickled down her face. She was in labor and alone. Behind her, the street lights blurred into long streaks of yellow and white as her car idled in the middle of the intersection. The world around her moved and fast forward, but she was stuck, unable to get out of the pain she was feeling. The woman's breaths came in short, desperate gasps. There was no one else, no one to help her. Just then, a police cruiser pulled up behind her. Officer Ryan Jacobs had seen all sorts of emergencies during his career, but nothing had prepared him for this. In a flash, he was out of the car, rushing to the woman's side, his heart pounding with the realization that this wasn't just any call. It was an urgent, life-altering moment. Ryan Jacobs had always been a man of service. His childhood had been filled with stories of his father, a veteran police officer who had served in the city for over 20 years. Ryan had watched his father help countless people, always quick with a kind word or a helping hand, no matter how tough the situation. As a child, Ryan had been captivated by the idea of wearing a badge, of being someone who could make a difference. Ryan had joined the force straight out of high school, his goal clear: to protect, serve, and give back to his community. He quickly earned a reputation for being reliable, methodical, and unflappable in the face of chaos. Whether he was defusing a tense standoff or helping a lost child find their way home, Ryan had built his career on making tough situations better. Yet, despite all of his success on the job, there was always a part of him that felt disconnected from the world he was protecting. His personal life, like his work life, was often put on the back burner. He spent most nights alone, either working or buried in paperwork at the precinct. Relationships were hard to maintain, and Ryan had long since accepted that his real family was the team of officers he worked with. He often found solace in his job, telling himself that it was enough, that his purpose in life was to make the world a little safer for others. But everything changed the moment he saw her, the woman in labor. In an instant, Ryan's entire world shifted. He wasn't just a police officer anymore. He was a man facing a life-and-death situation, and he was the only one who could help. Ryan's heart raced as he approached the car. The woman's eyes were wide with fear, her breath shallow and quick. She was clearly in distress. Without hesitation, Ryan crouched beside the vehicle, his instincts kicking in. "Ma'am, are you all right?" His voice was calm, steady, as if that would somehow ease the panic in the air. I can't, it hurts so much," the woman cried, her voice trembling. She gripped her belly tightly, and Ryan could see the tension in her face. She was in the throes of labor, and there was no time to waste. "I'm Officer Ryan Jacobs. Can you tell me your name?" The woman shook her head weakly, her eyes squeezed shut as she moaned in pain. Ryan's heart went out to her. She wasn't just a stranger in need of help. She was a mother-to-be, on the verge of bringing a new life into the world. And here she was, alone in a car with no one to guide her through it. "You're going to be okay," Ryan said, trying to keep his voice calm, trying to instill some sense of hope in her. But even as he spoke, his mind raced. He had been trained for a number of situations, but delivering a baby was not one of them. The hospital was miles away, and with traffic as heavy as it was, the chances of her getting there in time were slim. "I need to help you," he said firmly, his hand gently pressing on the car door. "Do you have any family or anyone with you?" The woman shook her head. "No, I'm all alone. My water broke, and I didn't know what to do." Ryan's heart clenched. She was alone, just like he often felt. He glanced around, hoping for someone to help, but the streets were bustling, and the people walked by, oblivious to the life-or-death situation unfolding before them. With no time to wait for backup, Ryan took a deep breath and slid into the car beside her. "I'm not leaving you, all right? I'm going to help you get through this. We can do this together." Ryan's mind worked at lightning speed. His training kicked in, and he mentally reviewed everything he knew about childbirth. He had seen medical professionals deliver babies on TV, but this was no scripted scenario. This was real life, and it was up to him to handle it. "Okay, listen to me," Ryan said, keeping his voice steady. "We need to get you into a position that's comfortable for you. Can you lean back a little? I need you to breathe slowly, in and out. I know it hurts, but try to focus." The woman nodded weakly, tears spilling from her eyes. Ryan's chest tightened, but he pushed the emotion aside. He needed to stay focused. "You're doing great," he said softly. "We're almost there. Just keep breathing." As the minutes passed, the woman's contractions grew more intense. Ryan kept talking her through it, his hand resting gently on her shoulder to reassure her. Despite the situation, Ryan remained calm. But inside, his thoughts were anything but. "I'm not a doctor. What if something goes wrong? What if I can't do this?" The questions flooded his mind. But Ryan knew that this was not the time for doubt. The woman was relying on him now, and there was no turning back. He couldn't afford to second-guess himself. Then, just as the situation seemed to reach its breaking point, the woman let out a loud cry, her body racked with the force of a contraction. Ryan's eyes widened. This was it. Without a second thought, he positioned himself carefully and took control, guiding her through the birth as best as he could. His hands were steady, his heart thundering in his chest. In a flash, he saw the tiny, fragile form of the baby. A baby boy. The moment was surreal. The infant let out a weak but unmistakable cry, his tiny body trembling in Ryan's hands. The mother, exhausted but relieved, collapsed back against the seat, her face wet with tears of gratitude and exhaustion. Ryan looked down at the baby, his heart swelling with emotion. He had done it. He had helped bring this little life into the world, in the most unexpected of circumstances. He wrapped the baby in his jacket and made sure he was breathing well. "You're okay," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You're both okay." It was the sound of sirens that brought Ryan back to reality. The ambulance had arrived, and paramedics quickly rushed to the car. One of the EMTs took the baby from Ryan's hands, checking the infant's vitals as another helped the woman out of the car and onto a stretcher. As they moved the mother and baby to the ambulance, the woman reached out to Ryan, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. "You saved us." Ryan could barely find the words to respond. It wasn't just the relief in her voice that struck him. It was the overwhelming sense of connection. He had done something that no one else had been able to do. He had been there for her when no one else was, guiding her through the most important moment of her life. As the ambulance doors closed and the vehicle sped off into the night, Ryan stood frozen on the street. The weight of the moment hung in the air, and he realized something profound. It wasn't just about the badge or the uniform. It was about being there for people when they needed it most. This was what made it all worth it. A few days later, Ryan received a handwritten letter at the precinct. It was from Amanda, the woman he had helped. In the letter, she expressed her deep gratitude for his quick thinking and steady hands in that critical moment. She described how she had been terrified, thinking she was going to give birth alone on a busy street. But then Ryan had arrived. She thanked him for his kindness, for showing her that even in the darkest of times, there were people who cared. The letter ended with a small note. "You're a hero, Ryan. You saved me and my son, and I'll never forget what you did for us." Ryan sat at his desk, the letter in his hands, tears brimming in his eyes. He wasn't expecting fame or recognition, but this moment meant everything. In the end, Ryan realized that no amount of paperwork or reports could ever compare to the feeling of knowing that he had made a real difference in someone's life. If this incredible story of courage and kindness touched your heart, please hit that subscribe button for more inspiring stories just like this one. Officer Ryan Jacobs' selflessness and bravery remind us all that heroes come in all shapes and sizes, and sometimes they wear badges and carry radios. Share this story with your friends, and let's continue to spread kindness and hope wherever we can. Remember, every small act of compassion makes the world a little better. Subscribe now to join us in celebrating more heartwarming moments that prove goodness still exists in the world.